Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of From. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love that, while everyone's just asleep in Colony House, somebody's just banging it out, but I guess it's right, it's kind of like its own little commune, plus it's right, people... Hey, you need to have sexy time, so no judgments or anything. It was just kind of interesting. I was almost halfway expecting Jim to, when he looked up, to see that and be like, okay. I thought he'd comment on it with something, especially because Tabitha's right beside him having a nightmare. I thought they'd be like, oh, okay, that's happening, but nevertheless, I thought we got a little more insight into how things run in the town. Obviously, it's choosing day. Basically, everyone gets to choose whether they live in Colony House or the town. And because we've gotten some inklings that all right, the Colony House doesn't follow the same rules as the town, because I guess whoever lives in Colony House is yeah, we don't want to abide by the town's rules. I'm wondering how they never really went into it, but how is Colony House different? But I get Colony House definitely has its own rules, but how do they differ from the towns is the question. I don't think Julie bothered asking any of those questions before she signed up there. But it's I think truth be told is she wanted to be away from her parents, because no matter what, she'll always be allocated to cool, if I stay with you guys, all I'm going to do is babysit. The fact is either because she didn't get to tour the town, and maybe that would have influenced her decision, maybe not. Because no, she don't know anyone in the town, but in Colony House, everyone's kind of sort of a family. A commune, so it's kind of no, this is a better place. These are the people who've taken care of us. These are the people who've helped us. But also, it's here she'll be able to kind of be recognized as an adult, be able to make her own decisions. Whereas, if she moved to town with her parents and her brother, should always be, once again, allocated to babysitting, she would never be recognized as just oh, you'll just be kind of yeah, they'll be the ones making decisions for you. She wants to be able to start making decisions for herself. Maybe Ellis was the same way. Maybe that's the reason why he decided to go to Colony House instead of staying in town with his dad. Maybe he didn't. Maybe him and his dad already had issues. Because it's interesting, because it turns out Boyd's the one who came up with the rules, the Colony House, and so that's what I don't know who got here when, how long anyone's been here. We haven't really gotten a time frame across. I mean, we know, the only one we know for sure is Donna. She's been here 3.5 years, something like that. She referenced that's how long ago it was her and her sister came to town, and her sister was killed by those creatures. But everyone else's timetable is kind of up in the air, but I thought that was kind of interesting. It is kind of sad. I guess it's the only available house in town. But of course, someone, the moment they're oh, it looks like someone's living here, when the father was showing them around town. And I was that's Frank and them's house. And it's yep. And even showed them the room. I'm they must be yeah, we're going to stay in this room. It was probably Frank and Lauren's room. But it's yeah, Megan's room, we're going to just kind of close that off. Maybe we'll kind of spruce it up, clean up the blood. Or we'll just lock the door and pretend that room doesn't exist and no one goes in there, because it's got to be a little messed up living in there. And I think it's interesting because Tabitha's barely, she's no, Jim, how are you taking this at face value? Jim's I heard those things tapping and whispering in the RV, because even the father was yeah, the reason why people are able to live a normal life is yeah, it's people who live on a fault line. At any point in time, that the earth can open up and swallow you whole. So you just kind of live every day, try to, just realizing it's part of the world. Yeah, live your day, because there's no leaving the town, and the monsters will come out at night and kill you if you don't take proper precautions. So it's just kind of it's part of life. They've been through this routine so much that it's right, you either bend or you break. And sadly, in Frank's case, he ended up breaking. Because he even says it later, the town, he let this town and the monsters in the woods get to him, instead of being there and properly protecting his family, forgetting what mattered most importantly, and that was his family. So, and it is choosing day in more ways than one, not just about Jim and his family choosing where they're going to live. It's also Frank, because the time has come for, as the father refers to it as, the box. Well, everyone calls it the box, but he refers to the box as the public guillotine. And he's you put a guillotine in the middle of town, and I love that it's like that it was his rule. He's the one that came up with this, but Boyd doesn't want to go through with it. He's at the church being like, yeah, I can't do it. I can't put Frank in there. It's like, you have to, because one, you very publicly warned Frank multiple times, and he still messed up, and he got his wife and daughter killed, and that's the rules of this place. And if you go back on your rules now, then all the rules are kind of thrown out the window, because it's like, oh, if he won't follow this, oh, if he won't back up this, like, oh, because it was meant to be a deterrent, but it's like, if you don't back it up, everyone's going to be like, oh, we can run wild, do whatever we want to, because what about the next time, or the next time? Like, are you going to be sympathetic to the next person who messes up? Because I was like, oh, someone must have done something before, like, how many times have they used it? It's like, no, Frank is the first time. That is wild to know that Frank's the first. And it's very heartbreaking, especially because now he's sobered up, and he's just like, he's like, yeah, Lauren always liked you, Boyd. She said, like, you were tough, but you were always tough because it was your way of protecting everybody. She said that out of anyone, you would be the one to get us out of this town. And it's just like, damn, dude. Seeing the man, it's like, yeah, he made a mistake, but, like, Boyd doesn't want to just send him into his death, because it's already bad enough he lost his family, doesn't want to send him to his death, to the point that he was agonizing over it. He decided, all right, here is a talisman, there's a shack in the woods, you stay there, you make some sort of life. But Frank was like, what are you going to tell the rest of the town? And he's just kind of, it doesn't matter. But when the time comes, Frank shows up and it's like, no, like, the most important people to me in this world, my girls, they're gone. I just want to be reunited with them. Because I was almost wondering whether or not Frank was going to kill himself out there in the woods when he was like, boy, could you give me a couple minutes? I was like, I'd be worried to leave him alone, because I'm like, he might try to kill himself. But I guess it's like, no, like, I don't get to take it. I think in his mind, maybe it's like, I don't get to take the easy way out. I deserve this punishment. Even when it tells people, like, Frank, you don't have to do this. Like, maybe we should talk about this more until you come to a he's like, my head is clearer than it's ever been, in a long time. It's like, this is what I want to do. I'm curious, will there be an issue? Because, yes, they did still go through with it, but the way Frank presented it in front of everybody, Boyd did try to give him a way out, but he chose not to. But it's still... So, people probably... If anyone's ever in this situation again, they're probably going to try and be sympathetic, or try and make Boyd more sympathetic to them. Like, no, you were going to give Frank a second chance. Why won't you give me one? So, it depends on how severe... Because Frank got multiple warnings, as they said, but... the rule is you end up there if your negligence leads to the death of a resident in town, and obviously his led to two, so it's kind of a one-strike rule. I guess your negligence can be like, if you screw up and no one gets hurt, you'll get a warning. You screw up and someone dies, that's when you go to the box. I even love when Boyd was in the church being like, what kind of... Because the father wasn't the type of priest he was hoping for. He's like, oh, wait, you want me to... Like, he's like, oh, you want me to kind of, like, deter you from this, tell you, like, no, this is wrong. Because he's like, oh, like, aren't you supposed to be, like, telling me to value mercy? And it's like, nah. Because I think, because for him, it's like, this is the cruel reality of it. That... this has to be done in order to keep things moving smoothly, to keep order in this town, to keep this tragedy from ever happening again. There has to be a sacrifice. And that's what I thought, because like, the Frank thing, you could see it in the trailer. That's what I was wondering, and that's why I was wondering if Sarah was kind of connected to that. Like, I thought the box is like, oh, a sacrificial lamb. It's like, oh no, it's punishment. Interesting. But I thought, like, oh, are we going to just, like, sacrifice people? To the monsters or something like that. That's what I was curious about, but no. Like I said, it's just pure punishment. At the same time, all of this is going on. You had the whole Jade thing, which I thought was interesting. He didn't believe what Donna said. And once again, they said everyone reacts a certain way. He was like, oh, you guys are good. He's like, do you know who I am or whatever? No, when he was first in the bed, he was like, do you know who I am? And she's like, oh my God, you're one of those. So I guess they've crossed paths with those type of people of like, I'm someone important. Like, do you know who I am? And he thought this whole thing was like a performance, almost like one of those like, rich, like, well, not rich, but like one of those experiences type of thing. If he's like, oh man, this is it. Oh God, you sold it so well. Not so much you referencing Ellis being like, yeah, I think you were trying a little too hard. So he's kind of going out and whatever, and exploring the town. And Donna's like, yeah, let him do whatever. I don't care. We've got too much to deal with already. So he took that lady's bike. He's like, oh, you got anything motorized? He's asking for that as he's taking the lady's bike and going off. She's like, no, that's my... What a dick. And then he goes to the diner eventually, and he's up there being like, oh, like, jumping the line with the food. He thinks everyone's, it's part of a performance, which I'm like, I'm surprised Kenny didn't blow up at him. Boyd kind of did later, but I thought it was interesting because Toby died in the same place that his dad did, so I thought this would rub Kenny the wrong way, but Kenny kept his composure despite everything, so... But Jay didn't believe all this. He thought, like, oh, this is like some cryptic thing. Then he ended up in that cellar, and you're like, what is that about? Because he went there, and he saw something, and it looked like it was someone crushed underneath a boulder, and then he looked back, and it was gone. But he also looked up at the ceiling, and there was a symbol there. I was like, what the hell was that? And he left the door open, and they didn't make a point of it, but I was like, him leaving that open is an issue, right? Did he let something escape the moment he came down there? Like, what was that about? Like... I mean, once again, we know these things could get inside your head, but Ethan's seeing something. He's seeing that little boy, but then, like, what about what Jade saw? Like, what was that? Because there's so much about this town they don't even know. Because even Jade was like, yeah, if this was some nightmarish hell or whatever, how do you have breakfast? And even Kenny was like, yeah, we don't know where the cows and the chickens come from. I was like, yeah, like, no matter how long they've been here, they don't know how it all works. It's like, we don't know how, but the talismans... I don't know. Like, were they already there? Like, did the previous people that were there before, like, Donna showed up at the very least? Because Donna and them didn't know about the talismans. They'd only, like, found that out after the fact. So it's like, I guess they just stumbled across that information. It's like, how you stumble across that? I don't know. But, like, once again, like, how long is it? Like, has this town been the way it is for centuries type of situation is what I'm wondering. But it can't, because, like, there's a diner. I was about to say, like, if it was, like, completely, like, old school, yeah. But, like, for there to be a diner, it's like, this has to be a somewhat... not unless the area changes, because that's what Victor's getting at, because he's testing stuff out, and Ethan's like, what are you doing? He's like, you're asking too many questions. He's like, I asked, like, 3 questions, but he's trying to see if the trees moved. And I'm like... That's weird, but there might be something to that. Because at first I was like, is he testing the boundaries, trying to see where, like, the boundary lines are? Because I don't know if they know for sure where they are before you get... Like, how far can you go before you get looped back in? They haven't really gone down that far. Like, obviously, you keep driving in one direction, you're going to end up back in town. But, like, how far before the loop starts again? So I'm wondering if it's going to be some correlation in that. But he's checking to see if the trees have started to move. So it's like, if that's the case, then maybe this place is not just the monsters. The place itself is alive and it's moving. It's kind of a breathing entity within itself. I mean, once again, like, what's up with the trees? What's up with the birds? Like, why are those the telltale signs for you being stuck in this loop? And is it like... what's attracting these monsters to this very specific spot? The fact is, there was that symbol card, and I'm like, is this place cursed? How long has it been cursed? But that's what I'm saying. Like, if the place can change, maybe it has been like this forever. Maybe it's kind of like that, it's always one of those mysteries that, like, TV shows will use. Like, part of me is like, Roanoke, for example. It's like, yeah, where did all those people go? It's like, maybe they got stuck in this, kind of like a loop like this, and then it became a situation where, as time is going on, this place adapts and changes over the years to draw people in, give them everything they need just to kind of keep, kind of almost like Hansel and Gretel. It's like, oh, the witch wants to stuff their bellies so that when I eat you, it's so delicious. Maybe that's what they do. They modernize the place over time so that people, as time changes, people change as well. And it's like, cool, give them all the amenities they need to survive, just so that it's like, they're constantly in a state of fear, trying to live their lives normally, but it's going to make it that much more delicious when we finally catch you and hunt you, because there's no stopping us. We're slow, but that's because we don't have to run. We can take our sweet, sweet time. Makes the meat tender when we rip you to pieces, type of thing. I don't know. do the monsters even think that far? Do they just purely go on instinct? It feels like more than instinct. The fact is that they just straight up hunt. They laugh. They're laughing at you and they're whispering to you. I mean, they convinced Sarah to basically kill Toby, the nurse, and she just killed Toby, but the point was to make it look like the monsters did it. And she thought like, oh, I'll be able to go home. And her brother's like, maybe you should come back home. She's like, no, I got to do something, because she's helping out at the restaurant, at the diner, because it's like, yeah, she's the reason why Kenny's mom is trying to handle things, which Kenny's like, yeah, denial kind of runs pretty deeply in our family, so she's trying to pretend like what happened didn't happen, but even at the end, she's like kind of having to say her goodbye. She kind of has to accept it. Kenny had to accept it last episode, so everyone has their way of processing and dealing with the grief. I don't know whether it was Kenny's decision or whether it was Boyd's decision, but showing Jade, because Kenny's like, I got to show you something. So I'm assuming like Kenny probably came to Boyd like, yeah, we need to talk to that guy. We gotta metaphorical spike strip him right now, because he's running wild thinking it's his entire game, and he's going to be a danger to everyone if he continues down that route. So showed him Toby's body, and Kenny was like, we're not trying to be cruel. It's just you have to recognize and understand the reality of this all. So Jade's going to be staying with Kenny and his mom for a while. So maybe we'll get a little insight from them, because obviously we learned nothing from Toby, but maybe get a little insight from. But I guess it's almost like, yeah, it doesn't matter who you were before. Nothing matters from. Well, it matters from before, because that's something to go, like a goal to, like, if we can figure this all out, potentially go home, then that's what you're returning to. But other than that, it's like who you were, because even Chrissy even said, like, last episode talking to Jim, like, oh, you're still talking about stuff like it's in the present tense. So it's like a lot of people, despite everything, have given up. Like, it seems like Chrissy kind of talks about things like was and in the past tense, because it's like, yeah, who knows if we ever will be able to go home. Like, you there long enough, it eventually probably chips away at that hope of yours, Circling back to Victor really quickly, he did find it really interesting the moment Ethan brought up his friend. He's like, wait, what? What'd you say? He's like, you saw a little boy outside. It's like, yeah. He's like, he's always outside. He's never inside. And it's like, huh. Because Victor seems like he might be on the like he might be one, like he seems like the weirdo, but he seems like the guy that's like potentially figuring stuff out. He might end up discovering some stuff, but he tells Ethan, is like, right, next time you see your friend, tell him Victor says hi, because Victor's the one that's got the drawings and stuff like that. You're like, what's that about? It's definitely going to be interesting. We're definitely going to need to keep an eye on Victor going forward. Like, there's going to be something with that storyline. I'm just curious what he will end up discovering, because even Ethan was like, hey, if you can, tell me about those if those trees moved. Obviously Julie has her reservations about Victor. It's like, yeah, he's creepy, like, oh, it's, yeah, like, oh, he's just wondering if the trees are moving. And she's like, yeah, that's not weird. It's like, yeah, well, that's not normal or something, what she says. Like, yeah, but neither are your circumstances currently, so Victor's no weirder than your circumstances. So, and I think it's pretty interesting that Boyd made the decision that, I guess, out of anyone, he felt the need to watch what happened to Frank. Whether he watched the entire time or not, he was reluctant to look out because, well, for one, because he knows they're going to rip Frank apart. But I think it's also like, right, you want your blinds, you want your windows covered because you don't want to look at them. Because looking at them, I think, probably helps with the hypnotism. Like, if you just have their voice, that's one thing. But I think, like, looking at them makes it a little easier for them to draw you in. So maybe that's why. But it's also because he was kind of hesitant to look, but that could have just been about the Frank thing. But because it's like, right, I created the box. I'm the one that created the circumstances. So Frank is about to die. It's on me. Like, I don't have the right to look away. You know, it's just kind of like an executioner being like, right, I have to be the one to bring down the axe. So, well, obviously I'm talking more medieval terms, but still. So it's only fair that, like, I have to watch. I have to bear witness, essentially. So I wonder, because the monsters, when they do get to Frank, they burst through the box. So, of course, I was like, well, they lock the door. So that's why I'm kind of like, I guess just to make sure that Frank doesn't change his mind last second or whatever. But I don't think he was going to. Kind of takes the option away from him anyway. But I was like, yeah, those things are just going to rip through the box to get him. So I guess what they're going to do after Frank dies is like, cool, because he even said like, "Oh, you're gonna bury me next to my family." He's like, and Boyd was like, "Of course." He just wanted like one last chance. Ended up going to that swing that he pushed Megan on, that little makeshift swing he made for her in the woods. But they're probably going to repair the box, and that's going to be the deterrent again. Like, cool. Oh, the box was used, and it's being rebuilt. So we screw up, we will end up there. So it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.